Good afternoon. My name is David Plazas. I'm the Opinion and Engagement Editor for the Tennessean, and I have the pleasure today of having Councilman Steve Glover have a conversation with me about his run for Metro at-large council member. This is part of a public service of videos that we're shooting this week with candidates for mayor and also for at-large council. I want to thank you very much for coming here today, Councilman Glover.
Thank you, David.
Now tell us, why are you running for at-large?
Well, because one of the major reasons, I believe, is we have some real issues going on in the city. We have some money issues. We're not, I don't think we're appropriating money in the proper places. We're not honoring our word to a number of things, and that means a lot to me. So that's one reason I decided to go ahead and jump on in on this thing.
Well, very good. You have been essentially one of the fiscal watchdogs there of the council. And we want to thank and welcome Maria DeVarine, our executive editor.
How are you?
Just getting started. But we're talking about fiscal issues, and it's interesting because you have been very vocal about your discontent about the way that Metro's finances are handled. Could you talk a little bit about that, about what in particular do you see the problem being, and what kind of solutions do you bring to the table?
Well, I think the one thing that we saw was today. All of a sudden, the mayor's announced that we found $7.5 million to do a 6% cost of living adjustment for teachers. Actually, it's not 6%, it's 4.5. So I like talking about real numbers when we're going to do these kind of things, number one. Number two, when we do that, I caught a lot of heat on what I proposed as far as the 3.5% property tax increase, which I don't think we need it. I think we've got money to pay for it. However, I just felt it was important to pay the cost of living adjustments for all the things and all the promises we had made. That's why I was willing to stick my neck out on the line. Well, we haven't gotten there. We haven't gotten our physical house, our money, our bank and everything in line. And all of a sudden today, we just happen to find $7.5 million. That's one of the main reasons I'm running right now.
Can you tell us a little bit about your thoughts on Nashville's growth, and can it be sustained? And if not, what you would propose to curb some of the ongoing issues associated with growth?
Yeah, I think we're gonna continue to see growth. That's my opinion. The major problem I believe we have is we're not reinvesting in the outer areas on infrastructure. And I've been fighting over that for 8 years now. We have to start looking at the basics. We have to make sure we have police, we have fire, we have all the essentials that are needed in order for a city to prosper. It's great to see all the buildings and all the things going up. What's not great is when we start looking at how the city on the interior side is starting to break down. So that's another reason I keep fighting to make sure that we are spending our money where we're supposed to be spending it. But we're not right now. We're not spending our money where we should.
A few years ago, you were one of the council members, along with at-large council member Eric Gilmore, who criticized the former Mayor Berry's decision to close inpatient care for Nashville General Hospital. It was, at the time, was described as kind of a strange bedfellow type of situation, but maybe not. Maybe there were some common interests. Could you talk a little bit about your thoughts on the hospital? Because that's been an issue for a long time, about how much money are we giving, how much are we subsidizing, and you were there in the fight.
Right. So I do financial planning. That's what I do, and I'm fortunate to have several doctors who are clients of mine. And I started to ask them, I said, can we close the hospital in 6 months? And they all told me no, emphatically, absolutely not. Then I started reaching out to the state and some of the feds and said, all right, guys, if we do this, do we really understand what we're actually trying to do here? And they all said, no, it will literally cost millions and millions and millions of dollars to try and close it, and money we may have to repay. So what I actually did was I said, let's put a bill in to keep the hospital open through June 30th, 2019, which was yesterday. That was my proposal, so we could sit down and kind of have a collective meeting to determine what was the best way to deal with Metro General Hospital. Whether we did that or we didn't, I mean, I guess that's a topic for conversation. We could not have afforded just to close it down. I asked two very essential questions in my mind. What's it going to cost to close the hospital? And the mayor's staff said, we don't know. And I said, what's going to be the fund that we set up for the indigent care piece? We don't know. Well, see, that's two wrong answers, and I didn't want to go to strike three. That's why I said, all right, let's put it in place before we do something we shouldn't have done and maybe couldn't have done. I was looking at how do we protect the taxpayers overall. Look, I think we've got major issues we have to deal with. I think there's a lot of money that we have to understand how it's being spent and why it's being spent that way. But you don't cut your nose off to spite your face.
I think along with healthcare, another important topic for our community, especially with the growth and the influx of new families moving in, is education. Mm-hmm. Can you talk to us a little bit about whether or not you think the mayor and the council should take a stronger role in the school district and the selection of a superintendent or possibly the appointment of school board members?
Well, so until state law changes, I don't think that we have room to talk about what we can, quote, do. The one thing that disturbs me about the mayor's move right now is if we're, quote, going to do an MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, I don't think it's constitutional. I was on the school board, so I kind of understand that issue, and I'm willing to step out and say I believe it might be a bad move right now. We shouldn't be doing it, you know, a few months before an election. We should be doing it when we intentionally sit down and try to figure out how are we going to fix education and who all are we going to bring to the table to really talk about that.
And you had mentioned before your proposal to raise the property tax. There were several proposals that evening that were considered. But I get this question often, which is, how is it that Nashville's booming, yet we can't balance our budget? And as a council member, what do you say to constituents, and what are some of your ideas for fixing the status quo?
Well, I think one of the things we have to do is sit down and look at where the money is being spent in the downtown core, how it's coming in, where the hotel taxes are going for, some of the other things. Yeah, there's a lot of money coming into Nashville. Unfortunately, it's not coming into the general operating budget. It's coming into the MCC, convention, you know, those aspects. And it's almost like we have to walk up with our hands out and our hats begging for money from those groups that are collecting millions of dollars, because before I got there, that's the way the bonds were set up and some other issues. So I think the key thing is we need to sit down, once this election is over with, if I'm there, I want to sit down with the state folks and say, all right, how do we kind of reproportion the money to where we're able to spread it out and we're able to take care of the city of Nashville and not just a couple of big buildings in downtown Nashville?
So the voters did not pass a referendum to address some of the transit issues in 2018. And there are a lot of folks who are coming in from the outlying areas to either work in Nashville or play in Nashville. Can you tell us a little bit about how you would work to solve some of the transit and transportation issues? And do you think the surrounding counties should have some skin in the game financially?
Not only some skin, should have a lot of skin. Because if you look in the morning, especially in my district where I live right now, in Hermitage, I would be willing to say 50%, maybe even higher, are tags that come from outside of Davidson County. Well, we can go to just, you know, Sumner County, Williamson County, Cheatham County, et cetera. This has to be a regional plan. And the one thing that always bothered me about when they came to us before and said, well, you know, if you guys pass this, if you guys go ahead and commit to spending the money, we're going to go out there and we're going to talk to our voters about helping pay for some of it. Well, we can't keep putting the Nashville taxpayers, we can't keep reaching into their pocket and writing checks that don't make any sense. So it has to be a regional plan. One of the reasons I'm not talking about transportation right now is because it's not a Davidson County issue only.
You wrote in your questionnaire to us about economic incentives that we only spend less than 0.001% of our operating budget annually. However, it appears to be time to stop bringing large businesses into Nashville until we get a handle on infrastructure and transportation. So could you expound a little bit more about whether or not it's an issue of the big businesses, an issue of the economic incentives, or a combination thereof?
So, you know, the one thing I've never done, David, is I'm not going to apologize for the way I voted in the past. The various incentives that were presented, I got the data, I got the facts, and I felt like it was a good idea. Bridgestone, I didn't want to see 1,100 jobs disappear from Nashville, high-paying jobs from Nashville. I thought it would have been detrimental overall for our economy. I didn't want to see some other things occur. When we look at it, you know, people say, well, one of the reasons we can't pay our bills is because of all the incentives we've given away. This year, it'll be just below $11 million as far as the pilots and everything else for the overall budget. So that's not as big of an issue necessarily as the $44.8 million in debt service that we will be adding to our operational budget this coming year. I think all of it contributes to how we fix things, but it also boils down sort of like your household budget. You know, when you say, well, gosh, I spent too much on my MasterCard or too much on my Visa, I got to pay those things down, and then I can try to figure out if I can go to Florida or go to the Bahamas or wherever it is I go on vacation, and that's one of the problems. I think now, to get back to the core of your question, I believe, is we probably don't need to be offering any more incentives until we can take care of the outskirts of Nashville. We take care of the infrastructure. We take care of the roads, the sewage, the water, all the things that are important in order to make a city be successful and continue to be vibrant.
Some residents and city leaders have advocated privatizing parking. I think you have been adamantly opposed to that idea. Could you share with our viewers a little more detail on your viewpoint and why you feel that way?
If it's a great idea, and if we can in fact make the kind of money they're talking about, we should do it ourselves. I mean, if we have no problem borrowing money for other things, $18 million bridge to nowhere right down here. So if we want to borrow money to look at how do we modernize our parking throughout the city, then I think we should do that. I don't think we need to get suckered in on an overall bet that we will never stand a chance of winning. The minute we take that money, that's it. I don't think the taxpayers, I don't think the tourists, I don't think anybody comes out ahead on that deal. And the part that bothered me the most about it is that they have to guarantee us $1.5 million a year, which is what we're already getting. Well, why would we do that? Why would we put our taxpayers in jeopardy that way when it doesn't make sense?
Thank you.
You've been a vocal proponent for respecting the voters' will in the Fairgrounds vote, and you also were very critical of the way that things came about with MLS soccer and the 10 acres as well. Would you talk about a little bit with what commitments the council has made and with what the progress is going to, what can be done to preserve the Fairgrounds as much as they can be under in terms of what the voters wanted?
Well, I think the one thing we have to be worried about right now is the racetrack. I mean, they've already gone in and demolished most of the fairgrounds. I don't believe anything they've said about the amount of parking and everything else that could, quote, occur there. I was there this weekend for the race, and you know, it's disturbing that now they've come back and said, well, you know, we only want a 20-foot setback from where the racetrack is for perhaps a parking garage, apartments, etc. The danger is nobody in the safety industry would say that's a good move. It's a bad move. We can't put tens of thousands of our people, Nashvillians, Tennesseans, visitors, in harm's way because that somebody wanted that other 80 feet. I'm not asking us to overturn what they asked or for what they say we voted on. I would disagree with that. But when they say that we approved it, no, we really didn't. If you go back and you look at all the drawings and everything else, it was literally like a crayon layout of how the stuff is supposed to work. We cannot literally overturn and kill everything at the fairgrounds. The racetrack is about the only thing you've got left that is the one thing that the people who voted on were extremely vocal. So I'm going to give it my last breath to fight for it in order to protect what I believe the people have asked us to protect.
So another controversial subject in town are the scooters.
Mm-hmm.
Will you share with us your viewpoint on the scooters?
They've got to go. It's not working. And I realize that didn't make a lot of people happy, but you know, for those of you who know me, I don't tend to mince my words. I pretty much will tell you what I believe. I think they've had an opportunity to make it work. I think they failed. Now, I know they're working to try and find a solution now. We may well, you know, defer the vote tomorrow. I don't know. I don't tend to count votes going into stuff. We'll see where that lands. But in my opinion, they've got to go because they have violated almost everything that should be, no, that is actually, not should be. They've violated everything that's legal in the city. They continue to ride on the sidewalks. They break the law all the time. And we have warned and warned, and they haven't taken it seriously. So I guess I'm trying to figure out why should we take them seriously right now.
So as a follow-up to that, some advocates say we have not done enough to enforce the rules, that we haven't done the ticketing, we haven't done the scooping them up when they're in illegal places. How would you address that?
Well, the first thing I would say is let's make sure we hire enough police officers. We're 100+ officers short right now because we haven't focused on the basics of the city operational budget. So that is one of the first areas I would try to do. We can't continue, though, to pour revenue and resources just in downtown because I've got people who live in my district right now, and I've been out talking to folks in Bellevue, Madison, etc. I mean, if somebody tried to break in your house, it may take 2, 3, 4 hours before an officer can get to you because we're too short-staffed for our police. You know, we have too many fire halls that don't have enough staff for the fires. So I don't think that we need to keep saying we're not enforcing the law. We're not giving the resources to enforce the law.
I wanted to talk to you a little bit about affordable housing because this is a topic that's affecting everybody. People are being pushed out beyond Davidson County who depend on work that happens anywhere around Davidson County, and obviously you abut Wilson County and in your district. What are some of the approaches? You've been very clear about the fact that you oppose the mayors under one roof because you say that we can't afford it.
Correct.
So tell me, what from your standpoint, what would you like to see? How would you like to see that conversation evolve?
Well, I think you bring in all the district council members and we sit down and literally analyze each district to determine what the needs are. You know, I caught a lot of grief out in my district about letting Hermitage Flats come in, which is a workforce, kind of an apartment complex, affordable housing, whatever the keywords that are used there. You have to have a job, you have to have good credit, those kind of things. one of the problems I saw was if you want to shop at Kroger's or Hardee's or Jack in the Box, et cetera, we keep pushing the individuals that work in these establishments, these businesses, we keep pushing them out of the city. Well, if we do that, we have to understand that those businesses won't be able to exist. So we have to help, but we need to help in the right way. Let's teach a person to fish, they eat, the rest of their life. Let's don't give them one meal. So for me, the key thing on that was to provide housing for people who want to work. It's not necessarily that the businesses don't want to pay them more. It's just we, the consumers, don't want to have our groceries and everything else go up exponentially to where we're like, I'm not going to shop here anymore, because it's a fine balance, just like the tax increase. If we raise taxes, then aren't we pushing them out even quicker? So that's that's kind of my opinion.
Thank you.
If you are elected, what would your top 2 or 3 priorities be in the first year?
Public safety. We have got to make sure that we are building our public safety up. We've got to make sure we've got enough police officers, firefighters, water. I mean, every aspect of the metropolitan government, we've got to make sure it's staffed properly. Potholes. I mean, I don't care. Anything that the local government should be doing, we should make sure that's funded properly. We've got to sit down and have a serious conversation about education. I mean, that's going to be a hard conversation. I'm not certain we're doing it right now. So we need to sit down and just be very straightforward, get away from the election season, and just have a hard conversation up front. Then the final thing is we have got to pay down our debt. We are out of control on our debt. $44.8 million this next year in debt service. That is what? 2+ times the cost of living adjustments for our employees? Bad move. Bad move.
Based on that question about debt service, in the case of an economic downturn, which is inevitable, how can Nashville plan for something like that?
Well, so I was chair of budget and finance on the school board when we took that downturn, and we ended up having to cut the school board budget, the operational budget, in the current year by roughly $7 to $11 million. I don't remember the exact dollars. It's hard to do. It's very hard. When you're halfway through a year, man, it's a tough thing to do. That's why we need to really make sure that we are building our reserve funds up enough and not going in and draining them when we have such, quote, prosperous times in Nashville. How do you get ready for it? That's about the only way I know how you get ready for it, and then have contingencies set in place to what can be cut next. How do we reduce our spending? I mean, I've got areas that I would recommend, but I mean, it takes 20 others on the council to agree with me.
Just as a quick follow-up, the last 2 budget cycles, the council was essentially in opposition to the mayor when it came to how to balance it, and there were a lot of criticisms about that the budgets were based upon things that hadn't yet existed, be it asset sales or the parking solution, for example, that's being talked about this year. What can the council do to ensure that they know how much money there's? And this builds upon the issue of the $7.5 million that you're doing. What kind of transparency can the taxpayer depend on, and advocacy that can depend on, to make sure, are we actually balancing our budget, and at what cost?
Well, I think what we have to do right now is, once this election cycle is over with, if I come back, one of the things that I want to do is let's start bringing the budget and finance group, from downstairs into the council chambers. Let's start talking about where the money really is. Let's start uncovering, what kind of shell games we're playing, and start dealing with things. Let's just start being honest with one another, as opposed to these games we keep playing repeatedly and hate to say over and over, but see, repeatedly over and over. It's the same thing we're doing with our budget. That would be one of the first things I would want to do to try and establish what monies do we have. Then I also have to think we have to have a very real and serious conversation about what our priorities are. I mean, if we want to be all things to all people, all right, I don't think we can afford it. But if that's what we think we're supposed to be, we just need to be honest with folks and say, look, we can't take care of the infrastructure because we're too busy buying toys. And I use the word toy not as a joke, but very seriously, because we have wasted more money than you could shake a stick at. We're building things downtown that don't necessarily help the overall economy. It certainly doesn't help the overall, city and the county. So I think we just have to have a serious, very straightforward conversation to determine where does the money need to go before we ask people that we want to take more money out of your pocket to raise taxes. I think we need to make sure we tell them what it's going to be used for. Now, I realize we have state law and the charter that says we can't, mandate it has to be used in this area or that area. But I don't think it ever hurts just to be honest and truthful with voters and tell them what we're going to do, as opposed to the games we play constantly.
Can you share with our viewers what sets you apart from the other candidates and why you should be reelected or elected to this position?
I think I bring a balance that does not exist. I mean, I'm one of the only conservatives that's out there that's willing to take this stuff on. I've been around this for a long time. Not saying I'm brilliant, certainly not at all, but I am saying I understand it, and I'm willing to fight. I'm willing to fight on behalf of the taxpayers, because I don't believe that we just open your wallet up and say, well, we ran out of money, so we're just going to reach into your pocket, grab more of yours, in order to make everything balance and work out.
And as in conclusion, we'd love you to tell the viewers why they should vote for you and also how they can contact you if they want to learn more about your campaign.
Okay, thank you. You can go to glover.vote. It doesn't have the .com at the end, just glover.vote. That was a hard one for me to kind of understand. You're welcome to call my cell phone. It's 615-481-4277. Why should you vote for me? Well, I think we need a balance. I think we have to have a balance in Nashville. And not to say that I'm the only one willing to take on the fight to help try to balance and try to keep government accountable on behalf of the taxpayers, but that's kind of what I see right now. I'm willing to step out there and get beat up and the other things that happen, and I'm okay with that. I'm thick-skinned. I've been around for a while. I think it's very important, especially as we go forward with all the growth that's occurred and what's happening in Nashville right now. We can't keep doing what we're doing. It's not working. The people in the Bellevue, Madison, Goodlettsville, Hermitage, Cane Ridge, etc., they're basically getting nothing as far as actual infrastructure. So somebody's got to fight on their behalf, and I think I'm tough enough to do that.
Well, thank you very much. And to our viewers, we thank you very much for joining us again. You can catch all of these videos on Tennessean.com. Remember that the deadline to register to vote is July 2nd. Early voting starts on July 12th, and August 1st is your last chance to vote in this election. Remember, your